Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and live this evening we have Dr. Angela Celeste May, and she is a clinically trained forensic psychologist. She's an author, she's a musician, and she is our resident mental health advisor. Good evening, Dr. Angela Celeste May. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine. Did you stick an L in there? Did I get an extra initial?
I thought, we're talking about something, and I thought we had a conversation that was part of your name. So,
no. Well, no, the L is not. Lady is, but
okay.
the L is not.
All right.
That's
all
okay.
Right.
That's
I gave you an extra accolade.
You did.
But tonight we are talking about the strength of a lady, and femininity is not weakness.
Absolutely.
So I want to start off with the first question. Why is femininity considered a weakness?
Good question. Good way to start. I love that you're starting with that, because it's like, okay, let's get the misnomers and the false information like straight right off the top. Mm-hmm. I would say most definitely it's just like they say, whoever wins the war writes the history books, right? So look at who is writing it, when it's being written, and perhaps some of that psychology behind it. So you can't get away from patriarchy. I think that's definitely part of it. Mm-hmm. When you tend to have, historically, anthropologists, historians, can all, speak to this, psychologists. When you have more patriarchal, meaning male individual humans tend to be more so at the helms of power, politically and otherwise, mm-hmm. then it is a natural human tendency that we all do. We tend to see ourselves and those like us, or whom we perceive as most like us, as having the best qualities, mm-hmm. and the quote unquote other as, having some good qualities perhaps, but we champion what we think is, looks like us. So in more, I would say it's mainly number one in patriarchal societies, meaning men are more so in charge. I hate to say that, because I know nothing of men being in charge in my own life.
I can't say that either. So
we're as queens, really, okay. But I've heard tell. And so therefore, the experiences of women and of being feminine, and it's like anything else. If you don't understand it, sometimes you may attack it. Sometimes you may recoil from it. You think it's strange, it's different. And so it must, it's perceived, it must be worse than, not as good as, whatever the case. And so being a lady, unfortunately, falls into part of that. And you can see the comparison when you look at matriarchal societies. Mm-hmm. We have matriarchal societies oftentimes in more tribal communities, be that Native Americans, or many African, cultures, just as examples. There are others around the world. But with matriarchal societies, of course, women tend to have more so of the power in terms of the overall society. And that womanness and that femininity takes on it's a whole different view of it. It is, we know it's a strength, but it's really championed and often celebrated in those societies as a strength. So I would say, number one, it's who's telling the story, mm-hmm. and who's writing those books. And so I think that's the number one place where some of that comes from. Oh, and one other thing I'll add too, if it is the society as, well, let's say Western, or not even Western, we'll say America, as our society has been historically, if it has been more male driven in terms of levers of power, then the assumption also is, what I was saying about that like is attracted to like, right? So if men may, I'm trying to do this without overgeneralizing, because it's not every man, of course, but if men may tend to define what they view as strength as something that they're experiencing, what it is like for them to set it forth, then if women may walk in a different type of strength, or they see it differently, then it's assumed that is an aspect of weakness. And so, it's
Absolutely. So we talk about the difference between matriarchal and patriarchal societies. And oftentimes in patriarchal societies, women don't have a voice. They aren't able to tell their story. They aren't able to stand up and speak up for themselves. There are other limitations on how you utilize that voice.
Exactly.
And why do you think that is? Because there is something about a confident woman. There's a Facebook meme that talks about little bossy girls. If you are a bossy girl, you become a leader when you grow up. And I've been called a little bossy girl many, many times in my life. I remember being a kid, and I love Star Wars. Everybody that knows me knows that I love Star Wars.
Yes.
I saw it when I was 7, and I missed it the first year. So I thought because it was still in theaters another year later. And so my dad took me to see it when it was still in theaters the next year. And I remember growing up on a block of boys and girls, and my 2 immediate neighbors were boys. And we were playing one night. And I remember this vividly because I tell people I've been fighting against sexism since I was a kid.
Okay.
And we were playing Star Wars, and the little boy said, well, you have to be Princess Leia. I didn't want to be Princess Leia. I wanted to be Han Solo because I wanted to fight and shoot with a gun. And they said, no, you're a girl. We have to rescue you. And I said, well, I don't need anybody to rescue me. And so then I'm trying to rewrite Princess Leia's character. And I'm like, well, and they were like, well, she doesn't have a gun and she doesn't have a lightsaber. And I was like, well, why? Why can't she have all these things? And so I remember we did it twice. I played as Princess Leia, and I had to sit there and say, somebody help me, and that wasn't fun. And then I made the little boy next door. I said, well, you be Princess Leia, and you tell me if you like it.
I love it. I love it.
I remember this vividly. And he did it, and he said, I don't like it because I don't get to do anything. And I said, exactly. That's how I feel. And so
Wow.
I'm sure there are lots of women, and we talk about this. You're a psychologist. I'm an author. We know doctors. We know politicians, all types of high profile, very intelligent, capable women. But there is this notion that if a woman is too confident in her speak, in her voice, her vocalizations, she becomes something more masculine. It's just like if you're a woman leader, I can't cry. So I remember a few years ago when President Obama was president, and if you remember when they were in the war room and they were looking for I'm drawing a blank to Osama bin Laden.
I was gonna say that famous picture.
And you see Hillary Clinton with her hand over her mouth, and everyone said, was she crying? And she said, no, I had allergies. And I thought that is funny that she had allergies. Not that it is, but the fact that around the world that she was judged by her gesture.
Exactly.
She had an open mouth. This is the Secretary of State.
Exactly.
She is one of the most powerful people in the nation.
In the world.
Correct.
Absolutely.
She travels the world. She is the spokesperson for America.
That's right.
And here we are upset because we think she's crying. Whether she cried or not in reality, and they had to spin it. But I mean, any loss of life is difficult.
Absolutely.
And so
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, and to your point, in terms of the double standard, remember when, I thought you were going to say remember when Barack Obama, remember he lost his grandmother just before he became president.
Yes.
And he cried publicly. And many people found that endearing, and he was able to show his emotions and all that. But the double standard, that helps to humanize him, But the double standard, like you say, if she does, she's hysterical and exactly, and not strong. You're so right. First of all, I'm just, I'm so impressed. Like you gave a lesson at 7. I mean, you brought it back to the core argument. And you did role play and I'm like, okay, really? Brilliant. 7. Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
But you did. But you're absolutely right. But I have to, because I know you are the science fiction aficionado.
Yes.
I don't want you to come after me. But I recently went back to see the original because I hadn't, since I was a kid, I hadn't looked at it. But with the whole Kylo Ren and the, and finishing up the story, I did look at the original, and I'd forgotten how strong Princess Leia was. Do you remember? She did save those guys.
She absolutely.
She was like, "I'm not waiting on you all."
Right. She's like, "You better come on.
You better come on. What are you doing? I'm getting out. I can't wait for you all." And for that be the 70s, which in one hand is no time ago, and another hand is like a long time. That was ahead of their time. You didn't see that.
You didn't.
You didn't see that. So I have to, kudos to how they, wrote the character and how she played it, because that was, as you understood at 7, that wasn't what we saw. That was very, very rare. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think also this culture shift, which I think humanity kind of like goes to this, when they were talking about, when women were first really, now I don't like to say in the workforce, because Black women have been in the workforce since 90.
Yeah.
We have always worked. Okay.
Yeah.
Always. But in terms of, maybe the white collar, going into the office environment, the corporate, whatever, those old articles from way back in the day when women, being the quote unquote minority, were modeling themselves to fit in, to be accepted, because there was a double standard, because, like you said with Secretary Clinton, any little gesture, they're scrutinized more so because the expectations already, the prejudice is already there that she, will she meet up? And so, and how they, even the cut of the suit and the, it was very, very, very male, it mirrored that, male power suit and everything. And I remember reading a few years ago about how it's an indicator of how women have continued to be able to break down those doors and get, there's good ways to go, as we well know. But as that became less and less rare, it's like there was more permission for women to bring their womanness into it and soften some of those suits and let the corporate armor reflect more of maybe who she is, and she not be considered any less powerful because of it necessarily. Now, having said all that, because we do have a long ways to go, regardless of your politics, whether you agree with her or not agree with her, whatever, but just in terms of imagery, and like you said, the double standard, you remember the big uproar and the way that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez was attacked because of what she wore. Do you remember that? Yeah. She was freshman, barely on the Hill. Why is she wearing, that looks expensive, and the heels.
Exactly. But okay, but don't you want her to look respectable? She was a waitress. She was trying to dress the part. I got what she was trying to do.
Exactly. And she did look the part. But it's, it's gotta be something, because there's always that. It's like the gender version of birtherism.
Yes.
Do you really belong here?
Exactly.
And to this day, it's like we're still having to answer that question. We're still having to, so it's an ongoing thing.
It is. And remember, Michelle Obama went through that the first time they came back from Hawaii, and she wore shorts, and she stepped off of Air Force One, and she was filleted for wearing shorts. People criticized her, and then after that, you never knew that she was someplace tropical, because she was always dressed to the nines whenever she showed up. Not saying that she should have or she shouldn't have, but I just thought, wow, is that what we're really doing? We're criticizing a person who just came back, although she's the first lady. They just came back from vacation. She's not in professional capacity. They're not speaking. But again, always having to look the part, not only visibly, but physically in what you wear, visibly in how you gesture your face. Because I know some
Absolutely.
of the things that were being said about Michelle Obama, and I'm sure she wanted to just frown her face or cry or, because there were days when I would read stuff and I would be horrified. I wouldn't want to
Yeah,
go out and see anyone. Uh,
absolutely.
but I think
Yeah.
that there is something different and special about people who assume those types of positions,
Mhm.
and we sort of have to uphold them because
Yes.
they're setting an example for the
Mhm.
younger generation, for the next generation that's coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, it's so true. And as with Michelle Obama and any and all of these images and these stories and these people, they all add to that conversation.
Mhm.
And we get the more examples that, how they say that, what is it? You can't see it if you can't be it. Those opportunities to see people like Michelle Obama in these roles, making a difference in the world, not but while bringing who she is fully to it. And
Mhm.
like you said, I'm sure she had some days, and we don't think about the often the what it must take, like
Yeah.
what it takes, sometimes the bravery, the strength. That's some of that strength.
Mhm.
That is some of that feminine, lady strength that we need to recognize more and more. And it's so interesting. I just saw. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking at something else, and I people are gonna like label me as whatever because this is my second time mentioning Ocasio-Cortez, but only because of the red lipstick.
Yes.
And she was saying how, and I think it's also her generation, because I was very much like this as well. I'm more Generation X, but I was the same thing. Yes, I'm an artist as a professional, musician and all that. So you come with the bam, the big hair, or the scarf. But even in my capacity as, well, I'm always Dr. May, but in
Yeah.
my capacity as when I was a forensic examiner for the
Mhm.
Third Circuit Court, when I was going to sit on that expert witness stand, or when I was going to, give some advice to the judge or whatever. It's always been important to me I've never been one to like tamp down, like, it's going to be some bright red lipstick, or it's going to be some, because I'll bring that flavor, and it's a part of being authentic.
Mhm.
You can be, yet how you define as professional, and you're on your job, your stuff, and that eye color or that lipstick is not taking one iota away from it if that's how you are expressing yourself. And I have found that people, uh, it can give people pause, but they will really tune in when you, like you said, when you present yourself like, this is the information I'm giving you.
Mhm.
And not only does nothing, this necklace doesn't take away from that. Um, uh, I mentioned Congresswoman Cortez because she was saying that a lot of people will say, you should tamp that down. It takes away from it. And she says what she was saying that I was resonating with, because that's, like I said, that's how I've been my whole career, is no, actually, I feel that that's part of the power of that feminine power that it's not in the lipstick, but it's in the carriage, how you carry yourself. It's in what you're putting forth. And we don't have to tamp any of that down, just like we don't have to be less Black or less Latina or less whatever, because all of that is part of the beauty and strength of who we are. Getting back to your first question and weaving all this together, in the field of track and field, in sports as an example. And it so speaks to these biases.
Mhm.
Again, it depends on who's writing the story, right?
Right.
So, they would always talk about with track and field, some of the strengths of like men runners and women runners, etc. And they would talk about like who would have the fastest times and who would, and so it generally speaking across a wide swath of athletes.
Mhm.
And then they would talk about, I remember just reading like some articles, and I remember the first time I read, it was several years ago, but she was a woman athlete,
Mhm.
and they were marveling, they being the scientific community, medical community, as well as, fellow athletes,
Mhm.
at two things. Number one, the criteria. See, always look at the criteria.
Mhm.
I tell I've told my doctorate students and all that. There's this kind of that old-fashioned thinking in science that, statistics, they never lie, and all, we don't have biases in the lab. Yeah, you do. But what we need to recognize is that we all have a perspective. Mm-hmm. We all come from a certain point of view. So what I preach and teach is, as to know yourself, continue to learn those lessons about what your biases may be. And then your professional responsibility is to be aware of them and to work not to let them let the results be what the results are. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, well, I just don't have any biases. Because if you go that route, you run a greater risk of your biases, which we all have, whether we're aware of them or not, of actually tainting, and one of the results and things. And one of the examples I give is, ask any hardcore, good old-fashioned scientist or researcher, why did you choose to study that particular population in the first place? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes and it doesn't have to be a bad thing, the bias, you may have just a passion for this, or your interest is there. That's even before the research even begins. So we do tend to lean in one direction or another, and it doesn't have to mean the statistical results or whatever is not to be trusted. It can be very good science, but it's not humanity or realistic, I should say. Not realistic. We all have them, but it's not realistic to say that we just don't have them when you leave them outside. I think it's more realistic to say we have them, we recognize we have them, and we want to make sure that they don't inadvertently negatively impact what I'm trying to study. But getting back to the athletic thing, the two things that I remember was really flooring the medical community and the sports, because I loved reading. I was like, oh, you always hear about men being, stronger athletically, and the criteria in terms of research. What were they asking, right? Well, they were basing it, oftentimes these research papers, et cetera, over time were based on researchers who were asking the questions in the first place, based upon the assumption that men are stronger because they were comparing men and women in certain sports in which men tended to have more power in certain things. So the generalization was, well, then, men are stronger. But they began asking different sets of questions. And oftentimes this happens when you get more women asking the questions. Again, right in the story, when you get more women researchers, more women sports psychologists, et cetera, they start defining it a little differently. So instead of, for example, power to run a 50-hour dash or whatever the case it is, they looked at endurance, and women had shown to have greater strength when it comes to endurance. So it was a different question, and you got a different result. Both are valid, but if you only always ask just the one question, then you keep reinforcing your own bias, seeing that, because so that was one of the studies I remember. And another one which I just loved, I'm not remembering, but and this is more common now, but this was like several years ago, quite a few years back. It was a woman. She was a champion athlete, and we see it now, but at the time she had a baby. And her explosive power and her endurance was off the charts after she had that baby.
Yeah.
And it was in a like a window, a period of time. And then so they started looking at, the hormone surges which, to your point, previously, because of who was telling the story, well, hormones, we talk about hormones, well, that's just that crazy off the rocker, she not stable, not seen as a source of power. A source of greater endurance, or so all of those things. So it was just blowing all kinds of people's minds. But just scratched the surface of just how much strength and power those aspects that are uniquely feminine are, that we heretofore had either ignored, not explored, or looked at as a liability. So yeah, it's how we ask the questions, what we're looking at, how we answer the questions.
And you're absolutely correct. It is. You've got to ask the right questions. But for African American women specifically, we have this notion of being strong. Yes. We've taken this thought that, okay, nothing is going to bother me. I'm just going to bulldoze through, and I sacrifice my health
Absolutely.
for the sake
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And we see Black women specifically who take on those masculine tendencies and then get criticized for it. But then when we get together, we have conversations and we're like, but I'm really not like that, because I don't smile. So everybody thinks that I'm mean, but I'm trying to be stern or I'm trying to be forceful. I don't want people to think that I'm dumb and giddy because
Mm-hmm.
I want to be taken seriously at the boardroom table.
Mm-hmm.
If I dress to, I don't know what the word, I can't think of the word right now. I'm thinking of provocative.
Really? Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
right. But
Or
not, but
both. But,
right. So if I look good in red lipstick, because red lipstick does attract some people, and like you said, for Ocasio-Cortez, for some people they're like, why does she have all that red lipstick?
right.
Or they're like, oh, I like her. She got red lipstick. I'm
Right.
going to listen to her. So if I'm a woman who looks like her, whether I'm a sister or other, and I wear my red lipstick and I have on my suit and I have curves and heels and I'm just doing my thing because I'm trying to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
still can put some people at an uneasy position because
Mm-hmm.
you're flexing that ability and they're uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to talk briefly for Black women who are struggling. What kind of advice would you give? Because, the ceiling at the executive level is very hard. I
Mm-hmm.
have a girlfriend right now who is breaking through some ceilings. And we talk often about what it's like to be the only Black person in the room and how you have to uphold everyone and trying to be a good manager, a good director, a good vice president. And how do you be authentic yourself?
Well, I would I would say my advice is definitely across the board, but most definitely for sisters, for being the only Black in the room. Um, one of the remember I think it was our last interview, and I was saying that even though I know it's absolutely very common for Black folks a lot of times, or people of color, to modulate the way they speak if they're talking to non-Black people, and I was saying that I know people do that, and I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
um, and not to put anyone down who does, because
Mm-hmm.
I understand there can be some slings and arrows when you don't. But I have I'm a public speaker as well. um, I've been on Capitol Hill and all that, those what the Congress people visits, when all kinds of situations. And I have had people tell me, and I have to say, I want to mention my students for a second as an example. When I'm teaching like my psychology classes,
Mm-hmm.
and these people oftentimes, more often than not, these are what they used to call non-traditional students, but it's not, it's traditional now. All ages, people coming back to school, folks in the latter part of life, or raising families, all of that. So oftentimes my students, they are that person who they're paying, no one's paying their tuition for them. We're serious, let's get this done. um and so they have they see the name, okay, it's Professor May, Dr. May is going to be teaching all that. And I come with like knowledge and all that good stuff. And I will just crack a joke just right in the middle of it and just be completely myself. And it's hilarious to watch the faces. They're like, did she really say that? And bust out that. Of course, it puts people more at ease, but it's also, it's one of the ways I model to them that if you are prepared, you have your knowledge and your passion, you doing what you're doing, you don't have to be a cardboard cutout, nor should you be a cardboard cutout, because I will not live a happy life pretending. And everybody wouldn't call it pretending. Perhaps maybe a softer way to say that would be, certainly we don't show all of ourselves at all times, of course not. But that's that word authenticity that that's a major part of the way I try to live my life. That I've my experience has been that when I've had students tell me, just the way you teach, it's like I've heard this so many times, you're so real. You're so real, or if I've been a guest lecturer, all that kind of stuff. It's like, you're so real. And what it actually does is you'll always have part of my advice is you'll always have those who will disagree with that. And that's just, it's just not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that it does in terms of power, it actually gives you power, because we know that the more comfortable you are in your skin, the more you're able to hook into what it is that you have to give that audience or that board or whatever. And another thing too, there are overt things and then there are subtle things. Oftentimes people will do that double take, whether they show it or not. And oftentimes they do show it a little bit, or they'll listen to you a little differently, or they'll chuckle a little bit. I'm on the board of the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation. Mm-hmm. And they are a separate entity, although they're related to the Michigan Psychological Association. Okay. So a beautiful sister, longtime friend and mentor, Dr. Josephine Johnson, beautiful sister. She's one of the few who's like forever the only person of color, only Black woman ever. Mm-hmm. So on the national level, the American Psychological Association, let me tell you, they're so powerful. As you write when you're learning to write in college, even if you're not going to psychology, that's one of the ways. Mm-hmm. So she has gotten very high up in that organization. It's a powerful organization. They do a lot of good things, but it's like there's mm-hmm. politics, So she actually recommended me to this board that I'm on. So I am chairing the grant committee. Okay. And I am the only Black person. It helps if you're in an environment where people recognize that they need to hear what you have to say. Yeah. Of course, that always helps. It does help. And so my presence there has helped, we've kind of changed the direction of what we're doing, because the foundation, basically we're giving grant monies to doctorate students of color. And I pushed the of color. Let's not tippy-toe around it. Oh, of a group of color.
Black students.
Come on. Okay. Well, to be, but Black and Latin and Indian. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so this is my first year joining. I'm sharing of that. And folks are shocked on the board because we've got like 3-4 applicants, whereas previously, changed some of the way that they did some things. They would get no applicants. Mm-hmm. They're getting no applicants. So that's only one example of a place where I'm, in an organization that is not particularly diverse in terms of color and, and ethnicity and all that. Really one of, not the only, of course, but one of the only, and on the board, the only Black voice. Mm-hmm. No, we recently got a new person, but before he joined us. And I feel, part of my advice is I feel I have a responsibility. I have to have a responsibility. It's not always easy to open my mouth and say, well, I may find that offensive, or, just be whatever, whatever feels authentic to you, while at the same time, again, being prepared, bringing that information, because if your stuff is tight, it minimizes the validity of the complaints that can be brought against you. So what can be said except, I didn't like the way she batted her eyes. Or maybe she moved her neck a little bit.
Right.
Maybe she did. But that report is tight and it's saving you off $20,000. I bet you they'll tolerate my neck.
Mm-hmm. And they sure will.
Or whatever, I'm still professional. Mm-hmm. I'm not yelling and screaming across the way. I am still professional, but, I can be who I am because it does not detract. It adds to it. And again, you're producing. Mm-hmm. Another thing I would say too is it's exactly like you say. We are strong. We're very, very strong, and Black women are strong. But it's redefining and defining what that means. Mm-hmm. If you're crying, it takes strength to cry. It's because crying requires letting. Mm-hmm. You just let that out, mm-hmm. and that means being vulnerable to a certain degree, and that takes strength. So we are very, very strong. But just as we, give advice to women in our own personal lives, taking care of everyone and not taking care of ourselves. Like your friend, for example, when she says taking care of, I mean, as a psychologist, I'd be like, what is that? What do you mean by that? Because we see what needs to be done. And I think that sometimes we do take on too much. We may not delegate, or we may, out of a loving heart, you want to make everybody look good. This is going to cause some issue. There's the support of others, and maybe even helping behind the scenes. But as with everything, there are parameters and boundaries to that. So one of the things I would say is ask, maybe revisit at times, because it can change, maybe project to project, maybe situation to situation, or over time. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes they are better than other times for stepping in places maybe you shouldn't step in, even though you're the one that could get that done wonderfully well. But that doesn't mean you should. Mm-hmm. And that's a key question too. Well, you want to be a team player and you want to make everything, all that's true, but you can be weakening the team if you're beating yourself down to the point where you're doing everybody's job for them practically. Now, I'm not saying your friend means that she's doing everybody's job, but I have had it. And another thing too is I think that as you get to know your own corporate culture, your own environment in which you work, you kind of learn the politics a little bit. You learn where people are. I'm not going to name any names, but I'll give you an example. Now I'm going to read a little bit from my book about my grandma, from whom I got this. Well, no, actually, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to give you this example.
Okay.
Without naming it. Okay, so I'm very much about being a lady. It's the way I was raised. My grandma was a quintessential lady. Mm-hmm. And by that, it was about respect God, respect yourself. You respect others, and you do not allow other people to disrespect you.
Yeah.
You just don't allow that. You do it. You can do it with love, but there's a strength about that. It's keeping your word. It's, admitting if you're wrong, taking on that responsibility. It's all of that. And, a lot of times we see people who are, as an example, who maybe we have ideas of what that maybe look like and different for different people. So she's soft-spoken and she dresses so nicely and everything, but she cusses like a sailor. Some people may want to shoot me in the head, but vulgarity is actually not part of being a lady. Mm-hmm. And some may say, well, who do you think you are? So I shall not tell you. to be quite a part of what she taught was that it's easy to be vulgar. Mm-hmm. It's easy because there are not that many swear words around. So it's easy to just keep recycling the same force, but it takes more brain work, more creativity, and more intelligence to get your argument across in a powerful manner that stops people cold without insulting anybody in the room. Mm-hmm. And you maintain your integrity in doing so.
Exactly.
So it was all about that strength. But this in the book, I told my personal story in the front part, examples from my own childhood of how I learned about what this freedom thing looks like. Mm-hmm. So in the book, Freedom, what is the experience of living without negative? It's on the bottom. What is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? My grandmother was definitely an example of that. It was not that she was perfect in any way, but her integrity was literally such that, judges would be like, we hold you in the highest of esteem. Mm-hmm. She would talk about her journey. She would talk about how she grew and et cetera. So in the front part, in chapter 1 on page 3, when I'm talking about some examples from my own background, this is what I said about my maternal grandmother, Willie Mae Walton. And it's so cool. It's another little aspect of our culture. Isn't it cool? I never thought about this growing up. I knew my grandmother's name was Willie, mm-hmm. because her father didn't have any sons. Mm-hmm. So and he was William. So she was Willie. Mm-hmm. And my paternal grandmother was Jimmy. Oh, and, wow. It's a Southern thing kind of. It's like that. It was like, yeah, you get grown. It's like they're both missing. But Willie Mae Walton. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wrote my grandmother. She was a person who believed that anything was possible and lived her life in that manner. Now, I could say it goes without saying, but it bears saying that she was definitely a Christian. We were raised as Christians. So your respect and your being a lady came from that. Is you respect God first, and then you respect what God made, and that kind of goes forward. Because that she was a person that believed that anything was possible and lived her life in that manner. She believed very strongly that because she was a child of God, she should always, quote, I put in quotes because this is what she would say, go first class, end quote, in every aspect of her life. For her, the concept of first class had nothing to do with material possessions. Now, she was very good with money. Very good, excellent credit.
Okay.
But she wasn't talking about money. She wasn't talking about possessions. Her view of the term, meaning first class, was that she was worth not having to settle for lack of respect from others because she respected herself first. And I think one of the most important words out of that whole little segment is the word worth. It was all about your worth. When you feel that you are worth something, it may be difficult to do it. You may do it in a quiet manner. You may not, you may shy, whatever, but you don't just let people treat you whatever, and you don't treat, others in that manner. So I want to tell you this story. I shall not say where I was working at the time, but I was the last one hired, newbie. Okay. I was a newbie at the time. And a couple of years after I got my doctorate, I was blessed to be a young doctor. I was a doctor at age 30. I was determined I was going to be a doctor by age 30 because, I had other things to do, like a music career and psychology and everywhere. And I was blessed at a family that helped me do that. So a couple of years after that, so I was the youngest one there. And the boss, he was good. He was a good supervisor and everything. But he would send emails. And come by. I to be fair, I didn't get anything harassing about it. It didn't have that feeling like, let's come by the office. It wasn't. I did honest. I mean, maybe it went over my head, but I don't think I honest. I didn't. I got you. But I do feel like he kind of wanted to, this is a bad, horrible choice of words. Feel out the new chick. I mean, that sounds awful, but feel, where's your head at? Blah, blah. Give you some guidance, whatever. Okay, some of that's, but I got stuff to do. So he would send the email. Oh, come by, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm not advising anyone to do this. This is just my story. And I didn't answer. So I went on, just did my work. I didn't go over there. Did my work. I got work to do. I had a secretary who, I had to type up her stuff for her to go. And then like a few days later, so I'm sure because I think he just did with everybody coming in here, and so I'm sure he thought that she must not, so he said it again. So he came by the office one day, knocked on my office, and I invited him in. I said, "Oh, well, have a seat." He was like, "Oh, have a seat, yours, okay," because he was supervisor. He had a seat, and he said, and this is part of being a lady too. Oftentimes there are things, I run my mouth. As you can tell. but, of course, part of being a lady is that you can say a lot with very little as well. And even when you're running your mouth, you can say some stuff with your eyes, etc. So he came and sat down and he said, we're reading each other. I had sent a couple of emails about you coming by the office, to just kind of talk some stuff. And this was me. Did you? So his reaction was, okay, Dr. Ray.
Not running like that. Like, stop. That's
really not. You have something valid to say, or you want to discuss the report? Got no problem. I don't have time to shoot them. I mean, and not to be antisocial, like we can chat. That's cool, whatever. Why am I getting up, walking over to the other end of sit? If we have some time like chat and it's all part of building, the culture and that's beautiful. But I felt it had a manipulative kind of whatever in there. No.
It sounds like it did. So that's a great segue into my next question. So what advice would you give men who are struggling to embrace feminine energy from the women they work with, the women they love? Because a lot of times you'll have this disconnect or this sort of back and forth between men and women, and men will go, well, who does she think she is? she's trying to tell me what to do, or I'm the man. Okay, we don't even know what you just saying you're the man means, but okay, we can all surmise what you're saying. But
Exactly.
you just said it like we're all supposed to know what that means, but you can't. You're struggling with the feminine energy, and as you said, you had your worth, your
Mhm.
self-respect, you had
Absolutely.
credentials, everything was together, you were your authentic self.
Mhm.
And when he asked you, oh, I sent you a couple emails, did you? You didn't get out there and say, yeah, no, I wasn't coming to your office because you crazy.
Right,
No, you didn't do all that. You didn't cuss them out.
exactly.
You didn't sit
And
there
I
and
didn't
say, well, I'm
lie. I
right.
didn't
You
lie
didn't lie.
either. I'm
Right.
not gonna
You were
lie. I'm not gonna say I didn't get them. That's not
right.
true. I'm not gonna
Right.
lie.
Right.
Right, right.
All you said was, did you?
Did you?
As if, well, let me sit here and look at you. And that's when you figured it out like, it's sort of what I thought. Because I always tell women, I call it my spidey sense. I said, when that inner tuition starts tingling, those spidey senses, the whatever it is your intuition telling you something is not right. And when
Absolutely.
you
That's right.
don't pay attention to it, and I hear it from people all the time, I should have followed my first mind. I said, you sure
Exactly.
should have.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
So, what advice would you give men who are struggling? Because they're like, that woman in my life or that woman in my office, I don't know what to do with her.
Well, why you got to do anything with it? I would say, well, the first thing is a couple things at the same time. Certainly, what comes to mind is what exactly is about her that bothers you?
Exactly.
What's
Mm-hmm.
bothering you? But I definitely would say, I would definitely say, whatever she is doing, you know, whatever, how they say, stay in be in your lane. That her being amazing doesn't take anything away from you. Now, if you feel her being amazing detracts from you, then that means that just is an indication that you have some perhaps work to do on your own sense of self. But this happens in there's a school of psychology that deals with is it structuralism? There's a couple of them: strategic psychology and structural. And basically, it's an approach to understanding relationships in families, and you can apply it to the business world, where interactions with people, where and we do this, unfortunately. I define who I am. See, his discomfort is often because my identity is threatened. So if your identity is your identity is your identity, if she is not disrespecting you, or if she's just doing what she's doing, and that may include giving you some direction because after all, she may be your supervisor, maybe that's what she's supposed to do. And you feel that, well, my being a man or being a powerful person or whatever requires her to be under me in some way or beneath me in some way or less than me in some way, then that means that that's an indication that you need to work on how you're defining yourself to begin with. Because your definition of yourself is between you and your mirror. And then it goes out from there as far as how you treat other people. So certainly you don't want anyone to disrespect you. But I would ask questions. Do you define yourself as your strength as a man, as somehow, connected to what she is or isn't doing, or is or isn't as a person? And that means you don't have autonomy. Can you stand alone on 2 feet so that if she's not in the room, you still feel like that you are a strong person? And then when she comes in the room, you still feel, if that changes because she's in there, then that may mean you have some identity or self-esteem issues to work on. That number one, how you define yourself, your identity, and how much of that definition is in your own head tied or required that she be less than. Because what psychologists have found and what people just in relationships have found is the more secure a man is in who he is, again, that word let, the more he can let other people, men and women, be who they are. And when I say let, I don't mean we shouldn't challenge each other or kind of ding, you know, somebody if you feel they're doing something wrong or anything like that. But I mean that them being who they are doesn't detract from who you define yourself to be as a strong person or as a powerful person or as a leader or, you know, whatever. So asking yourself those questions, why am I really so uncomfortable? Do you feel that she needs to be, and that's another thing I said, it needs to be less than. I would say ask yourself questions. He's saying to our gentleman, if what she's doing or how she is bothering you, and maybe you can't quite put your finger on why. Sometimes it can be a good exercise to maybe list, like actually write it down or just kind of go in your head. Well, how do you expect her to be? Because we're talking about expectations. And she's stepping outside of those expectations that you have of her. And that's part of why that's bothering you. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it's natural because, you know, it's different. I take issue with what we call natural because you may not expect her to, I don't know, hand you $1 million of cash or something like that, or just, you know, just make up something, whatever. So, you know, hand you a cake. I mean, something that you may find positive. Okay. So just because you don't you may expect her to do that, but if she does it, you may be like, oh, you know, pleasantly surprised. So it's not just that it's unexpected. It's maybe unexpected and it flies in the face of what you believe you need her to be. See, you're crossing boundaries into, now you're getting away from just defining yourself. You're telling her who she needs to be. And that means that you're crossing. Mm-hmm. You know, you're getting into her business. So yeah. Why is what she's doing bothering you? Do you need her to be less than you in some manner, some subservient position? You may not define it as less than, but do you need her to not be your equal? Like a lot of times, you know, men will say, no. You know, I totally support her being blah, 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 just as long as she doesn't. Uh-huh. And the she doesn't ... Mm-hmm. Often has to do with stepping into what he, again, expectations defines as his territory. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you may not mean it, but the things that you might define as your territory are actually human territory, and you're telling her to be half human because only you get to just like you did at the age of 7. You asked her, do you like the way it feels? Why do you assume that she like exactly? And then another exercise too is you know, replace whatever she's doing with, you know, a guy. Mm-hmm. Or a guy in the office, or your cousin, if it's a relationship, whatever, a male person. Mm-hmm. And see if it bothers you as much. And you know, oftentimes it doesn't bother you, and that means that you are walking around with some stereotype biases about, you know, who women are, how strong they are, and what they have to give. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, being a lady is strength.
Yes. It is, being a lady is strength. It is integrity. The strength coming from respecting yourself. I would say respect God and respect what God made. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot of things. That means how you treat yourself, how you treat others, you know, the golden rule. Being as honest that, you know, sometimes we don't know, but being as honest as you can, it builds integrity. And my grandmother was really big on one's reputation. Like she would say, the reputation is, you know, it's all you have. And these things are important. They're important in general, they're important for all of us. They're important for women and men, but definitely Black folks and Black women, because I would especially say this to our younger folks too. Like, well, you know, what difference does it make? And blah, blah, blah. It makes a difference because your integrity and your reputation and your name, what you're known for. I'm a witness. I'm sure you are as well. Your name, you know, especially in our society, it's like money. You look at it. It's amazing with your name alone, the doors your name will open. Yeah. If you are, you know, you don't have to be perfect, but you try to do right by other people, and you try to treat people as you want them to treat you, and you try to really lift up other people, all that, and you build a reputation over time because you work hard, you try to do, you know, excellent quality, and it will open doors, won't it?
It sure will.
Yeah, sure. People will bend over backwards. They will give you opportunities, all kinds of stuff. That money, you know, money alone is not bad. And we know that there are some very famous rich people who are not respected.
Yes, we do.
We shan't name names.
No, we're not talking about tonight. But that is a prime example of
Prime.
femininity being strength. It is not weakness.
It is a strength, absolutely.
And you're very
absolutely
correct. There are wealthy people who are not so nice. We see them on television in a variety of ways, on television shows, politically, sports, you name it.
Yep.
And the woman is asked to walk behind or, be silent or all of those things. So I would just encourage women to embrace your femininity, be authentic,
Absolutely.
use your voice.
Yes.
But greater than anything, respect what God made. If you love God and you believe in God, He made you for a purpose.
That's right.
Learn your purpose, respect it, and go out and do it. And you are absolutely right. You have nothing else more than your name and your reputation.
Absolutely.
And we know, because we've seen it, when people have it ruined, it's hard to get it back.
It's hard to get it back. And you can't buy your way back. You can't. And something else I would say too, also a part of the way I was taught, that also means, I think it's unfortunate we don't tell younger people this more. And I don't know if folks are still, but the way I was raised, my grandma used to say, the way you live your life, after a while, she didn't say it gently. she didn't say, it shows on your face. She's like, God slaps it in your face after a while.
And we see it.
We see it. And so, these 25-year-olds who look like they're ancient of days, broke down, and those who are 65 or even 85 look just as fresh as a daisy.
They do.
It's the way that you think, the things that come out of your mouth, all of those things, they help build who you are, and it shows on your face, it shows in your body, and that also has to do with sexuality. Just quick, and a sport. It hardens you. Just don't be available to.
I know.
It's all a part. It's all a part. It's all about. And so therefore those are also there are overt and subtle benefits. There are positive things from this. It will bless you. It'll bless your kids. You're if I have not been the recipient because of my mom, my grandma, and my dad, or who they gave to, and seeing about others, and doors will just swing open like crazy. And you have to be responsible with that, of course, and be grateful for that and continue that forward giving. But all of that.
Absolutely.
That your name is the most valuable thing that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Angela Celeste May. Every time you come on, we always have a great time, and I have enjoyed you again. And
thank you.
Learned so much. Tell us where we can find your book, how we can reach you, and where we can see your music video. And because you're doing a performance too. I
am. Yeah. Oh, I did. I did. And I forgot to mention when I was on last. Yeah, I recently, with the shutdown, I've been busy doing stuff like your show, which I love, and teaching virtually, and doing lots of stuff, including musically and otherwise, psychology and stuff. But I miss performing. So I did a performance recently. My guitarist and I, we did about 90 minutes, enjoyed that. But thank you for asking, as always. My book, Freedom, you can find it at Amazon.com. You can also find it's published by Ex Libris, which is XLIBRIS, Ex Libris. It's published by Ex Libris, so you could go to the Ex Libris site, but you could also, of course, go to Amazon to get my book. You can go to, I'm all over, just Google me, I'm everywhere. So my company, A.M. May and Associates Incorporated, that I have with my sister, Michelle May, is a counseling and consulting company. If you go to ammayassociates.com, you'll go to our website. Find us on Facebook as well. We have a company Facebook. Same with me. I have my personal Facebook. I have my music Facebook, and my name. There are no stage names. This is all Angela Celeste May, Dr. Angela Celeste May. I'm on Twitter too, and that's Celeste, CELESTEMUS1 on Twitter. But Instagram, all that stuff, I'm there. And in terms of my music, thank you for asking. I do have a YouTube channel. I've had it for a number of years, and I've got a couple of different, like, I've got a bunch of stuff on there, but I do have a series actually. I've got like over, I think, 50 videos, 40 something, that I did on vocal quick tips. And let me tell you real quick, what's cool about that is, yes, there are tips of all kinds of stuff for vocalists, but also anyone who uses their voice, his or her voice professionally. So that's poets, teachers, public speakers, so a lot of those tips are good for that. Or fellow instrumentalists and definitely vocalists. So look at my YouTube video, and that is also where you can see my music videos. And I'll give you a little hint of what I'm working on right now. Oh, and my CDs as well. You can go to CD Baby to find my CDs and Reverb Nation. So lots of information. But I'll give you a little hint, and that is I am shooting a music video this Sunday with a really well-known group that I had as a guest on my last album. And so that's all I'm going to say. It's coming out. It's going to be coming out in a few weeks. So I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. So yeah, so I got lots of beautiful things going on. But yeah, you can Google me, go to Amazon.com, iTunes for my albums as well. Yeah, so all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Angela Celeste May. We look forward to seeing you next month to see what's going on in mental health. Thank you all again for tuning in to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis. Thank you for following us and watching us. You can now find us on Apple Podcasts. You can also still watch us on YouTube. It is fantastic. But I want to remind everyone to always be magnificent.